Most people believe they are free. They believe their choices belong to them. Their actions feel intentional. Their decisions feel personal. But if you look closely, very closely, you'll notice something uncomfortable. Many of your actions do not begin with choice. They begin with pressure. A pressure you did not consciously invite. A pressure that feels urgent. A pressure that says now even when nothing is truly urgent. This pressure is subtle. It does not shout. It whispers. And because it whispers, it is rarely questioned. Desire does not force you. It guides you quietly. It nudges attention. It accelerates emotion. It shortens patience. Until one day you realize something strange. You are always moving, but rarely deciding. You respond faster than you reflect. You act faster than you understand. And afterwards, you tell yourself a story to explain why it happened. This is not a lack of intelligence. It is not a lack of willpower. It is a system where desire has learned how to bypass your awareness. And here is the truth most people never hear. Breaking free from desire does not begin with control. It begins with slowing the mind enough to see what is actually happening. Because the moment you try to fight desire directly, it adapts. It changes shape. It hides behind justification. It disguises itself as need. This is why most attempts to discipline yourself fail. They attack the surface, while desire operates underneath. This episode is not about suppression. It is not about denial. And it is not about becoming rigid. It is about understanding how freedom is rebuilt internally. Once desire has been running your life for a long time, if you are listening to this, chances are you already feel it. That quiet exhaustion, that sense of being pulled instead of choosing, that feeling that your mind no longer pauses the way it used to. This is not where the story ends. But before freedom can return, something far more important must happen first. You must learn how to create space again, between urge and action, between feeling and response, between wanting and moving. And that is where we begin. Breaking free from desire does not begin the way most people expect. It does not begin with resistance. It does not begin with discipline. And it certainly does not begin with willpower. It begins with something far less dramatic, but far more difficult. It begins with slowing down enough to notice what desire is actually doing to you. Most people never reach this point. They rush straight into control. They try to stop behaviors. They try to block urges. They try to force change. And when they fail, they assume the problem is themselves. But the real problem is this. You cannot break free from something you do not fully understand. Desire does not operate on the surface. It operates underneath awareness. That is why fighting it directly almost always backfires. To understand how freedom returns, you first need to understand why desire feels so powerful in the first place. Desire feels powerful because it hijacks the nervous system, not the intellect. This is a critical distinction. You do not lose control because you stop thinking logically. You lose control because your body begins to react faster than your mind can intervene. Desire accelerates internal timing. It speeds up emotional response. It shortens tolerance for discomfort, creates a false sense of urgency. This urgency is not real, but your nervous system treats it as if it is. And the moment urgency appears, choice disappears. So the first step in breaking free is not saying no. It is restoring internal time. This is why people who try extreme discipline often feel tense, rigid, or exhausted. They are trying to override urgency without neutralizing it. Urgency does not dissolve through force. It dissolves through delay. But delay must be trained. At first, even a few seconds of pause feels unbearable. That discomfort is not weakness. It is withdrawal. Desire-conditioned minds experience pause the way addicts experience silence. Because silence exposes dependency. The brain has learned to regulate itself through stimulation. Remove the stimulation and instability surfaces. This is why many people feel anxious, restless, or empty when they try to stop indulging desire. They are not missing pleasure. They are missing regulation. So the goal is not to eliminate desire. The goal is to replace desire-based regulation with internal regulation. This is where most people go wrong. They remove the coping mechanism without building a new one. Imagine removing crutches before the leg has healed. The collapse is predictable. Freedom is not about removing desire. It is about teaching the nervous system that it can remain stable without immediate relief. That teaching happens slowly, and it happens through repetition, not force. The first practical shift is learning how to sit with urge without moving, not suppressing it, not judging it, not obeying it, just noticing it. This sounds simple. It is not, because the moment you stop reacting, the mind tries to convince you that something is wrong. Thoughts appear. This is pointless. I'll deal with it later. Why am I even doing this? These thoughts are not rational arguments. They are pressure signals. The nervous system is uncomfortable and wants relief. Your job is not to argue with these thoughts. Your job is to outlast them. Urges peak and fall. Always. But only if you do not feed them. Every time you act on desire, you reset the clock. Every time you pause, the urge weakens, even if it doesn't disappear immediately. This is the beginning of freedom, not victory, stability. Another essential shift is learning to separate feeling from action. Most people believe that feeling automatically requires movement. This is false. Feelings are internal signals, not commands. Desire trains the brain to treat signals as orders. Breaking free means retraining the brain to treat signals as information. You notice hunger without eating immediately. You notice boredom without escaping. You notice attraction without acting. This retraining rebuilds authority. Authority is not control. Authority is the ability to choose timing. When you regain timing, desire loses dominance. Another overlooked part of freedom is environmental control. Not in the sense of avoidance, but in the sense of friction. Desire thrives in environments that remove effort. Infinite scroll, instant access, no resistance. Freedom requires reintroducing friction, not punishment. Friction, small obstacles that slow action. Distance, delay, inconvenience. These are not weaknesses. They are tools. When friction increases, urgency decreases. And when urgency decreases, choice returns. This is why people who change environments often experience sudden clarity. The mind is not stronger. The pressure is weaker. Breaking free also requires confronting boredom, not escaping it. Boredom is not empty time. It is unstructured time. And unstructured time reveals what desire was hiding. Restlessness, loneliness, unprocessed emotion. Most people run from boredom because it brings unresolved material to the surface. But that material must be faced. Otherwise, desire remains necessary. You do not need to enjoy boredom. You need to tolerate it. Tolerance builds capacity. Capacity builds freedom. Another key shift is redefining identity. As long as you see yourself as someone who struggles, desire retains psychological leverage. Identity matters, not in an affirmational way, but in a behavioral way. You become what you repeatedly practice delaying. Each pause reinforces a new identity. I am someone who does not rush. This identity stabilizes behavior far more effectively than rules. Breaking free also means letting go of the fantasy of permanent control. There will be urges. There will be pull. Freedom is not absence of desire. Freedom is non-compulsion. Compulsion disappears when the mind trusts itself again. And trust is rebuilt through consistency, not intensity. Slow repetition beats dramatic effort every time. This is why long-term freedom feels calm, not heroic. And calm is exactly what desire cannot survive. Desire feeds on agitation. Remove agitation, and desire starves quietly. Not immediately, but inevitably. As internal regulation begins to return, something important happens quietly. The mind starts to feel less crowded, not because thoughts disappear, but because they stop competing for immediate action. This is one of the earliest signs of real freedom. Thoughts can exist without demanding movement. Urges can arise without hijacking behavior. Feelings can be felt without being obeyed. This separation is subtle, but it changes everything. Most people believe freedom feels like excitement. It does not. Freedom feels like space. Space between feeling and response. Space between thought and belief. Space between urge and action. And in that space, choice reappears. Another crucial step in breaking free is learning how to regulate emotion without escape. Desire often survives because it is used as emotional anesthesia. Stress leads to indulgence. Loneliness leads to stimulation. Uncertainty leads to distraction. The emotion itself is rarely addressed. Breaking free requires learning how to stay present with emotion long enough for it to move on its own. Emotions are not static. They rise, peak, and fall. But when interrupted repeatedly, they never complete their cycle. They linger in the background, creating constant pressure. This pressure fuels desire. So instead of asking, "How do I stop wanting this?" the better question becomes, "What emotion am I avoiding right now?" When emotion is allowed to pass naturally, desire loses its function. It no longer has a job to do. Another element of freedom is rebuilding trust with yourself. Desire-dominated living damages self-trust. You promise restraint and break it. You intend change and abandon it. Over time, you stop believing your own intentions. This loss of trust is destabilizing. To rebuild it, you must start making small, reliable commitments. Not dramatic ones, simple ones. Pause before acting. Delay slightly longer than last time. Notice urges without responding. Each small follow-through repairs trust. Trust repairs stability. Stability weakens desire. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Intensity burns out. Consistency retrains. Another overlooked aspect is learning how to exit comparison loops. Desire feeds on comparison. What others have, what others do, what others enjoy. Comparison accelerates wanting. Breaking free requires reducing exposure to constant comparison. Not isolating, but curating. Protecting mental bandwidth. A calmer mind wants less. Not because it has less, but because it no longer feels behind. Freedom also requires accepting discomfort without interpretation. Discomfort does not always mean something is wrong. Often it means something is changing. The mind, conditioned by desire, interprets discomfort as danger. But discomfort is simply the nervous system adapting. When you stop labeling discomfort as failure, you stop running from it. And when you stop running, desire loses leverage. Another important shift is learning how to end the day without stimulation. Desire strengthens at night. Fatigue lowers resistance. Silence amplifies restlessness. Ending the day calmly restores authority. Reflection instead of escape. Stillness instead of noise. This does not require perfection. It requires intention. Over time, the nervous system learns a new association. Night equals rest, not indulgence. This retraining changes everything. As freedom stabilizes, something unexpected happens. Desire does not disappear, but it becomes quieter, less demanding, less persuasive. It stops pretending to be urgency. And when urgency disappears, fear disappears with it. You are no longer afraid of missing out, because you are no longer rushing to escape yourself. This is where long-term freedom lives, not in constant control, but in non-reactivity. You respond when necessary. You wait when possible. You choose when it matters. And this choice does not feel forced. It feels natural. Calm becomes default, not because life is easier, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. This is the difference between restraint and freedom. Restraint feels tight. Freedom feels steady. At this stage, desire may still visit, but it no longer moves in uninvited. It knocks, and sometimes you answer, sometimes you do not. Either way, you decide. That is the quiet power most people never experience. Not dominance, not suppression, but self-leadership. Breaking free from desire does not feel like victory. There is no moment where you suddenly feel powerful. No dramatic shift where urges disappear. No clear line where you can say, "I'm done now." What happens instead is quieter. You notice that urges arrive and leave without dragging you with them. You notice that silence no longer feels threatening, that boredom no longer feels unbearable, that waiting no longer feels like loss. You begin to feel something unfamiliar. Stability, not excitement, not intensity, stability. And stability changes everything. Because when the mind is stable, desire loses its urgency. When urgency disappears, choice returns. And when choice returns, life stops pushing you forward without your consent. You move again, but this time from clarity instead of pressure. This is the part most people never reach. They think freedom means wanting less, but freedom actually means needing less relief, needing less escape, needing less distraction, needing less stimulation to feel okay. When that need fades, desire no longer controls direction. It becomes a suggestion, not a command. And you stop asking yourself, why can't I control this? Because control is no longer the goal. Presence is. You are present with discomfort, present with emotion, present with silence, and presence dissolves compulsion. This is how freedom settles in, not loudly, not proudly, but permanently. You don't feel different every day. You simply notice that you no longer feel pulled. And when you are no longer pulled, you are finally free to choose where you stand.